Okay, hello folks. My name is Jenna Rose Sands. I am a visual artist, writer, activist living in London, Ontario, and I'd like to welcome you to our anti-racist panel and workshop. Before we begin, I'd like to state that the intention of this panel isn't to educate folks about racism or what racism is. We're assuming that you're coming to the table with an understanding of what racism is and that it exists. This panel, comprised of amazing BIPOC folks within the community, is not going to focus on our own traumas, our experiences. We're not here for any sort of disclosure of our own traumas in order to legitimize the need for anti-racist work to happen and these discussions to occur. This panel is to discuss what anti-racist work looks like with direct actions, the legitimacy of racism and systemic oppressions within organizations and communities will not be debated here. We're looking to have a dialogue that focuses on what people can do to ensure that their communities, organizations, and families and friendships are truly anti-racist. So first up, we're going to have a few introductions. So I will go, let's start with Amanda Kennedy.
Sagoli, Gawasanahawi Yangat, Miona da Aga, Gwali. My name is Amanda Kennedy. I'm from Oneida First Nations of the Thames. I'm an advocate for Indigenous youth and women, as well as a social innovator, founder of two social enterprises. One is Yotini, a youth-led social enterprise, and the other one is Gawasanahawi, where I consult, educate, and facilitate. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Alicia. A lot of people also know me as Trini. I am a queer Trinidadian woman of color living here in Dishkan-Zeebing. In the past 15 years, I have been working in a lot of different sectors, such as the Violence Against Women movement. I have been active in organizing immigrant and refugee rights movements, and currently my focus is on creating inclusive spaces in the LGBTQ+ community. I love queer history, I love educating others, and I am one of the founders of Queer Events.
Ashe, my name is Anthea Williams, residing here, born and raised in London, Ontario. I currently work in the social service field with folks affected by homelessness, chronic or situational, as well as mental health and addiction issues. Social agitator, activist. I'm taking my lived experience as a trans, non-binary POC person and trying to shake up the world.
Bonjour, Ani. Awâsis Nadishnikaz, Wabjeshi Nadodem, Michif Nishanabe, Nijmanadu Dao, Deshkan-Zeebing Nadinda, Gichagagijuang Minwa Wamitagoj Zeebi Nadonjibat. My name's Awâsis. I'm Métis Anishinaabe Ukrainian from the Pine Marten clan, and I live here along Antler River, originally from French River. I'm a PhD candidate in the geography department at Western, and I study Indigenous energy justice and Anishinaabe pipeline resistance, and also a spoken word poet, and really excited to be on this panel and have this conversation with all of you. I feel like, you know, in this time of social isolation, we're also getting a little visiting in, so this is great.
Totally, it's so good to see everyone. And Heenal.
Hi everyone, my name is Heenal Rajani. I am a father of two, stepfather of two as well. I live in downtown London. I'm a newcomer to Canada. I've been here just about 3.5 years. I grew up in England. My grandparents were born in India. My parents were born in East Africa, and now I live in Canada. I'm a co-founder of Reimagine Co, which is a zero-waste store and community space in downtown London. We're just moving to a new location at 206 Piccadilly Street, and we're one of the organizations that's part of organizing this Place Matters conference. Really passionate about place building and community building, holding space for conversation, and excited to be a part of this panel today. And looking forward to tackling my own racism and learning more about how to engage and how to really walk the walk as well.
Amazing. Thanks, folks. I'm so happy to have you here. So the term and idea of anti-racist work seems to be a hot item these days. You know, it kind of reminds me of when the conversation around cultural appropriation came up. And I feel like in the fluff of conversation, the telephone game where people are exchanging ideas, that a lot of these terms and ideas lose their power. They get watered down. So what are your thoughts on the ideas of like the term anti-racist work and where it is? Is it a trend? Is it a buzzword? Is it being watered down as we see with cultural appropriation? So I'm going to ask Amanda, what do you think about that?
I agree. Everyone's now trying to have the conversations about anti-racist works, and I believe that it's more than just doing like the checkbox. It's actually doing the work, meaning it's going to be an ongoing process. It's going to be something that we're going to all be learning. We're all going to be growing together. So that's how I see it, is this an ongoing process. And I hope that a lot of people, when they do talk about anti-work, thinking that they can't just do one or two things and be like, okay, we're good to go now. It's a growth process. That's how I see it.
Amazing, thanks. I agree. Like, it's definitely like there isn't a checklist to have. Like, I'm worried that it's just going to be like one of the things that's like with land acknowledgements. You know, oh, we did it. There's our thing. Anyone else have something to say? Anthea, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I feel as though it is a buzzword these days, but I think that I kind of picture it as like a sweater that has, you know, links missing out of the sweater, and it's something that you need to deconstruct to reconstruct, that it's part of decolonization, that it's part of deculturalizing and relearning at the same time. So I agree with Amanda that it's not a checklist, it's not a step-by-step, and that it's going to be a long journey for all of us.
I love that analogy. Alicia, do you have anything to say on that topic?
I second loving that analogy. It's an amazing way to look at it. I'm going to take a little bit of a cynical perspective in where I do think it has been trending towards more of a buzzword. And I think we've seen, even with the Black Lives Matter movement, people were getting fatigued quite early on into the movement and kind of desensitizing themselves. And this idea of, well, it doesn't really affect me, it's not my issue, and a lot of these different excuses that we were hearing. And my concern is that there are a lot of us who are doing really good work and who are looking at racism and anti-racism and how these systems interplay in personal lives and in business lives. But there are a lot of folks who they are sharing the buzzwords, they're sharing the popular articles to share, but they're not actually doing the work, and they're getting very defensive when they're called out on things.
I think that that's one thing that we're having this discussion about, like, what does that work actually look like? You touched on London having fatigue and having the idea of, you know, it's not my problem. Do you think that is very characteristically a London thing within the places, like the communities, like, you know, that they work that they're very segregated into their own neighborhoods, and there is this idea that we don't really need to work together as a city to bring down things because it's not my problem? Heenal, you're nodding your head to that.
Yeah, I do feel that London feels quite segregated, and you know, I was shocked actually when I looked up the statistics that there's over 70,000 people from a visible minority who live in London, more than 20% of the population, and yet it feels quite segregated or even in silos. And I feel like, you know, the problem with, you know, if we ask the question, is this anti-racism, is this idea of doing anti-racism work a trend? The thing is, like, as people say, it's such hard work to do that people either don't realize what they're, you know, what's all is involved, or you start on that journey and you either just give up, or there's not the supports, or there's not the spaces for that work to happen, or there's not enough of that. So I think there is a degree of, I know we're not talking today about like raising awareness of racism, but I think there's some of that does still need to happen more for maybe some people, but also creating those spaces for support and knowing that it can be a scary journey, because once you start down that road, you kind of go down the rabbit hole and realize that the whole foundation of this country and of the, you know, Britain, where I was born, foundation of the United States, is all based on these incredibly racist pasts from different persuasions, and then the whole foundation of society is turned upside down. So of course, you know, there's a lot of interest that would want this to remain a trend, And I think it's up to all of us, to the extent that we can, to ensure that it doesn't, and to really keep doing the work and keep having the conversations, and not, don't let this just fade away like eating Tide Pods or Baby Shark.
Oh my goodness, Baby Shark. Awâsis, do you want to tap in? Do you have thoughts about this?
Yeah, I echo everything that's been said so far. I think that's something else that's really specific to the London context, is this idea that these movements, Black Lives Matter, Indigenous rights, or Idle No More, are kind of like a new thing, whereas we've been organizing within our own communities for a long time, since contact, arguably. And so yes, I think that anti-racism's become a buzzword, it's become a trend, kind of a hollow interpretation, but it's also connected to a really long history of anti-racist organizing. And something I really like that people pointed out is that we also have to prepare for this organizing to continue into the future. The burnout rates of activists are really high. So how do we take care of each other moving forward so that we can really be in this for the long haul?
Totally. So let's just, open up your mics, and I just want to hear some very quick ideas of what does anti-racist work look like? What does that look like in your life? Just kind of like start giving people some ideas of what that looks like.
Saying Indigenous peoples' nations' names right.
I think changing street signs, like we don't need things like Plantation Road, and
I was like, acknowledge your own racism.
Mm-hmm.
I would say be prepared to have really uncomfortable conversations, and just to be prepared to be uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm. Anthea, do you have any?
Yeah, I think that just even having a space where BIPOC people or Indigenous people can grow and communicate and focus on the issues that affect them and have that voice and agency is the most empowering scenario. Because I think in this work, we're all already combating white supremacy and white privilege. And sometimes there's this desire to have the work that we're doing be seen and legitimized by those white folks, which just reinforces that white supremacy, that agency and that empowerment does come from our communities itself. And that I think gaining more empowerment and political power and social power and economic power with those voices is a key to anti-racist work.
Amazing. Alicia, do you have any?
I see having more BIPOC folks in positions of leadership and changing those systems.
I totally agree. I think having BIPOC folk at the table for the discussions and the solutions and the ideas. I personally have an issue with, people coming down to save us or to save a community without having the discussion and having people there. We don't need a savior complex coming in. So those are all great ideas. So Place Matters is all about the discussions of place and communities. When you think about your experiences here in London, what stands out to you as being a major barrier for anti-racist work to be successful? We can have people trying to do amazing things in the city, but if the city and just the structure of it and how London has a major barrier, then it's not going to work. So in your own experiences, like what is a barrier to moving forward? Heenal, do you have anything to?
Yeah, I think as I was saying earlier, I feel like London feels quite siloed and segregated, and there's a lack of spaces that I'm aware of, at least as a newcomer, a relative newcomer, spaces for cultural exchange. And so I don't know exactly what that looks like, and I invite that conversation. And I know there's like this cultural festival that happens once a year, and I'm like, I always go to that. I think, why is this once a year? Why is this not like every day? And so something that we hope for our space. Our new place, Reimagine Co. in downtown. It's when it's renovated, it's going to have a whole big event space that's completely free for the community to use. And we want to host events, and I don't know exactly what that looks like, but to just bring people together. And part of it is around something we want to do is around food and the diversity of food and cultures as sharing food and slowly just opening up those spaces for conversation. So that's something that I see that we're offering, and I'm excited to hear what everyone else has to say about this, also about what we can do here, because it sometimes feels hopeless or scary or just confusing. It has been cool to see the Black Lives Matter movement and I Don't Know More happening here, but it's not enough. There's something else that's definitely needed.
For sure, definitely. I feel like this city, whoever plans the events and stuff for the city, maybe needs to have a bit of a more diverse board. So, or reaching out to the various communities in the city and asking them, what would you like to see? And what do you need to celebrate your community and who you are? I would love to see diverse funding going towards different communities and having what they want, as opposed to here is what you're going to do. Awâsis, do you have anything to speak on that, like a major barrier within the city?
So much. Where to even begin? When you're speaking, Jenna Rose, immediately I was thinking about the barrier sometimes of even reaching the table. Like we like to say, oh, like inviting people to the table, being at the table, who's at the table. Well, sometimes screw the table. Like maybe these conversations, these decisions should instead be being made in circle or around a fire or, in community specific ways. And so I think the main barrier is like the normalization of racism and colonialism. So when we're thinking about placemaking, right, we're not just talking about the physical space or environment. There's a layer of social reality here, right, that's being comprised based on our meanings we're ascribing to that place, to our social relationships. So I think the elephant in Vic Park, we'll just say, is the statue of the soldier that honors soldiers that fought for the empire during South Africa apartheid. We know apartheid's wrong. We know racial segregation is wrong. So why does a visible symbol in our public life say otherwise, right? This normalizes racism and normalizes colonialism. And we need to start realize that the way we experience something as mundane as a public park differs significantly. And we can't assume that we have the same experiences or associations with our public life and our social life we share.
So change the table, and perhaps just as a first step, get rid of any visual public monuments that, celebrate colonialism and violence. I feel like those are really great direct action steps.
That statue drives me crazy. The tank is one thing, glorifying war,
yeah.
But do people realize that it literally honors soldiers that were pro-apartheid? That
people don't, and I think that's a London thing too. I wanted to hop over to Alicia because I was aware of Queer Events, the organization that you have co-founded, asking for more BIPOC representation within Pride, and that has been an issue. And when we're talking about direct actions and being brought to the table, and instead of the systems that be like, here you go, this is what you're going to do, because Pride in itself is a very big place. We're creating a community for minorities, that can celebrate and have their way, but within that there's different communities in itself. So, what is a barrier you feel for queer BIPOC folks to have that space that they need within London?
I think that's a huge question. Love it.
I feel that was kind of a collective sigh.
Yeah.
I think the reality is what is happening in London is something that BIPOC communities are known for. We're known for our resilience. We're known for having to live within systems that don't acknowledge us, that don't support our autonomy, that don't support our power, our knowledge, our ways of being. And so we create other systems. So, you know, it's one of the reasons that I love queer events, why I love House of an Auntie, because, you know, there are spaces that are not open for queer BIPOC folks. So we've created our own. And this is something we have done throughout the years. And this is an alternative way of being. You know, if the system is broken, then sometimes you need to just create your own that actually works. If you look at the broader terms of barriers, and I want to make a small side note because a lot of the conversations has been around more BIPOC representation, but also understanding that there is this kind of homogenizing of the BIPOC community, that we are entirely like one hive mind almost, and not recognizing that even within the BIPOC community, there are different perspectives, there are different ways of being, there are different ways of knowledge. So what necessarily is my stance as a person of color is not necessarily another queer person of color stance. You know, there are folks within the BIPOC community that are very much pro-police. And then there are those of us who are understanding the systemic racism and the violence that has been perpetrated onto us by these systems of power. So you're never going to find the same thing. So you can say, well, okay, there are two people of color sitting on a pride board right now, or there is a person of color sitting on this committee right now. So therefore we have representation. But that doesn't necessarily equal the representation that you need in that space, when those folks in themselves might be upholding systems that continue to perpetrate a lot of abuses of power and oppression upon the BIPOC community as a greater whole. You know, you talk about, your question generally was about barriers within the London community. And I think we need to look at barriers as twofold. We need to look at physical, practical barriers, and we need to look at individual barriers. And I think for me, practical barriers is funding. You know, you brought it up. There needs to be more funding for different communities. But a lot of people don't realize when you look at funding throughout the city, through, you know, federal, through grants, through community foundations, you can only access funding if you are a nonprofit or charity. And a lot of times BIPOC communities don't have access to these systems of power, especially queer BIPOC communities as well. So even within that, with having a trusteeship and having another organization hold that money for you, it is the silencing of these communities and saying, well, we don't trust you. We don't trust that you have the power and the autonomy and the ways of knowledge and being in order to do your own work. So we're going to have someone oversee you. And that really discredits the community as a whole. And then you want to look at the individual actions. And I think silence is one of the biggest barriers. And it is silence that is being perpetrated by folks who can no longer name the racist actions that are happening to them. And it's also the silencing that we as a community keep perpetrating when we don't listen, when we continue to uphold folks and, you know, businesses and organizations that continue to perpetrate racist actions and abuses of power. We then silence the folks who are suffering, but we also tell folks that it is okay to continue these behaviors. And that's something that needs to start ending.
100% amazing. You know, while you were speaking, I was thinking about, so one of the questions is coming up is about how a lot of folks get paralyzed by enduring discussions about racism, which I feel really stalls the progress of forward momentum. And this seems to be for a variety of reasons, like, oh, it's not me, it's the other person, I don't want to feel uncomfortable, this is too difficult, what makes you think I can change anything? And a whole slew of things. But one thing I have noticed is, Trini, when you were talking, is the dreaded microaggression. So, you know, microaggressions are these small little ways of undermining and being aggressive with race. And, you know, I think about it a lot. And I think that, you know, microaggressions are one place where people forget about anti-racist work. Like when they when they think about doing this work, they're like, I need to go tear down a statue and I need to go do this and I need to do, but it's like, no, you can start literally at your kitchen table. So I just want to like talk about what is, you know, what do microaggressions look like? And like, what is a way that we, you know, stop that, you know, because I feel like a lot of people don't understand how they themselves can commit microaggressions against other people. So, and in some cases, people don't even understand that they're doing it until it's pointed out. And unfortunately, that's like an education piece that, you know, is longstanding. So does anyone have something to talk about it? And Anthea, can I go over to you?
Yeah, sure. So one of the insidious parts of like microaggressions is, I think we already like in Canada have this unique perspective of being so close to the United States, and part of the conversation around racism and anti-racist work always falls to, well, we're not the United States. Things don't happen the same way. And it's this like forced idea of that whole Canada is great and we don't have racism here. And so microaggressions are another function of this like pervasive, very passive aggressive way of undermining a person's wealth or worth or value with snide comments, that create an internalized effect where you are internalizing this racism that is happening to you and you second guess it yourself, but they happen all the time. So it could be something as little as like the questioning of your hair, or being second guessed at work while everyone else is not. And then you carry these things with you. And I think that having the conversation is a really important dynamic, because it brings awareness to the fact that, like, again, unintentionally or not, these things affect BIPOC folk in the world, in workplaces, in every situation. And they continue to just build and build and build in an individual and in a population that creates this trauma that just gets recycled and recycled. So I think that one of the ways is, yeah, having a better understanding of what microaggressions are, what they look like and their effect, and having policy and procedure, especially within like workplace or school dynamics, and then step-by steps, what am I going to do when these things happen and how are we going to fight them, so that there's some accountability for this thing, so that you are actually recognizing that this is a legitimate form of violence that is perpetrated on POCs all the time.
So if you could throw out like a microaggression, so if someone was like, what is a microaggression? Tell me an action. What would that look like? You know, if you can think of something off the top of your head.
Well, I can think of largely being like policed for my hair. So like unprofessional and going into a job interview and being immediately dismissed because of my hair, or having even just like family members beside me like, oh, we have to do something with your hair, as if like my very existence is unprofessional.
Yeah.
So that, yeah, brings in, yeah, I guess that's one of them.
Yeah. One that I think of is like, you know, in job places where you have people like definitely profiling people. And I'm like, that is a microaggression. Like, they can see the way that you look. They can see that you're like keeping your eye or whatever. And it's like these subtle ways that it's like a reminder, like, hey, the world's still racist. Amanda, do you have any examples of that?
Well, even when running into barriers, working with children, youth, and adults, both Indigenous and non, one thing that I've learned is the lack of education. So my generation, being a youth of yesterday, I didn't receive a lot of education about Indigenous or my own history or culture in the school systems. So even when working with children, if you ask, like, how many of you know about residential schools, or how many you know about some of these issues, you'll see a lot more hands go up. But the older you go, so in college, you'll see half of those hands go up. So half of them are getting that education, but half of them still aren't. But when you go into like an adult community, working with adults, you're lucky if you get 10 people to put their hand out of like 400, 500. So that just working in that field and seeing those barriers is that when it comes to working with children and youth, it's easier to have these conversations because there's not so much layers to work through. You know, there's not, they're receiving that education. They may not be receiving as much as they need to, but they're definitely receiving more than I did in my generation and the generations before me. So that's what I'm seeing too, is that it's that lack of education, and it's the adults that are lacking the education because it wasn't available for us. So that's like kind of leaving us with that responsibility of educating ourselves and then finding that education and not relying on the Indigenous or the BIPOC community to educate us. You know, they need to go and find education. I think that's a big barrier that's happening. So a lot of people might pick up a book and read up a book and then think, okay, now I get it. And now they're trying to move forward doing these plans of actions, but not realizing that they're making a more mess. They're creating more damage than good because, again, they didn't completely educate themselves. It's like that checkbox. Okay, I read a book by a great author. That's amazing. That's great. But you need to do more than just read one book and then feel like you're ready to move forward and make movements and make changes. And a lot of people are doing that. And I think that's where then they're insulting the BIPOC community. They're making us frustrated because then they're just assuming like, okay, well, I got it now. I got educated myself. And I think that's what the big thing is no, we need to keep educating ourselves. We need, and us too, like a lot of us are still learning our own culture and our own history as well, and need to heal from that as well too. So it's like, we all need to educate. And again, I think everyone just wants to pick up a book and get it done with and move on with their lives. But it's like, again, no, it's not so simple.
Yeah,
and
like the wanting to.
problem lies within the adults because, yeah, they're not getting that support. The younger ones are starting to get that support and those changes are happening. But it's the adults, and then that's what even one of the university students said after talking about this and said, it's scary to know that our adults aren't getting educated. And it's scary that they're the leaders and they're the ones that are doing things in our community right now with lack of education. So. Yeah,
it's so, you know, as we're having this discussion, we're starting to see like a bit of a framework happen, you know, education, and it's ongoing, you know, when we're talking about anti-racist work, education ongoing, and not putting that on, you know, the BIPOC community to do that. Like, everyone walks around with small computers in their pocket, like Google, Wikipedia, everything. You can find the information in these stories. You don't have to put that in tokenized people in your life to tell you, you know, all the traumas of their life to understand anti-racist work and what racism is. So the education, self-educating is incredibly important. Not thinking that you have it all right away after reading something. So, and also on that note, like, no savior complex. Like, if you want to help a community, the best you can do is to provide that community with the resources to make the change that they see and they need. And maybe that also means bringing folks to the table, but it also looks like listening and maybe tossing out the table. You know, maybe we don't need to sit in a boardroom. Our conversations may happen differently. Just because the system exists doesn't mean that BIPOC community members want to enter into that system. I think a lot of people think that, you know, we like, give me space, let me into the system, let me into the cogs and stuff. And it's like, no, actually a lot of us just don't even like the system. We just like, get rid of it, you know? So as we're starting this framework, I think it's excellent. Awâsis, do you have anything to say about microaggressions? And then we'll go to Alicia after.
Well, I just wanted to go off of what you were saying. I think like this idea about like paternalism and people assuming they know better. There's often this assumption that like there aren't organizations in our communities that are already doing the work that allies and supporters are interested in doing in. And they kind of, that's where you get like attitudes where people just like come in and you know, expect you to just like join their organization or contribute labor to whatever they're doing without actually putting in the time of like getting to know what's actually happening in our communities, what has happened, and building ongoing relationships so that, yeah, you know the ways that people are looking for support and not just assuming you know best. But tying this around to microaggressions, I often like, you know, whether it's on campus or in larger academia, people have this assumption that if I'm like passionate about something or if I'm just like visibly upset by like ongoing oppression and violence, that I'm angry. I'm often told I'm a bully. And I think that this, like, Anthea, you brought to my attention this term like tone policing. And I think this is like the most common microaggression, is just assuming that there's like an appropriate way for BIPOC to like package their emotions. And yeah, just I think people should really challenge like the assumptions they have about like women of color. Like if you're assuming that someone is angry just because they're like communicating to you, then maybe you have some like racialized assumptions that should not go unchallenged, right?
Yeah.
Would you say like that is like something, you know, you can all collectively nod your heads, it's just a quick question, that you encounter a lot within London and the organizations in London, whether it be social services, you know, retail, anything, like this idea of tone policing, and that microaggression actually stops people from being able to hear what you have to say within London, especially making change? Yeah, I'm seeing like a lot of head nodding, like you're supposed to act a certain way as a person of color. And I feel that is a really big barrier within London, is, you know, coming to the table and they're like, oh, you know, she's gonna be all angry because she's all like political. And then it's like suddenly our ability to see beyond that is really limited. And I feel it's a pretty large barrier within London to creating change where it needs to be had. Alicia, let's head over to you.
I just want to say quickly, I once heard this fantastic analogy for microaggressions to help people understand it. And it was think of when a mosquito bites you. Like, you shrug off the first bite, it's nothing, it's a little itchy, whatever. But if you go through your day and you're continuously getting bitten by mosquitoes, by the end of the day, you're swollen, you're bumpy, you're itchy, you can't focus, you can't do anything, and you kind of just want to scream. That is what microaggressions are. They're the really small things that you may not consciously think of, but by the end of the day, you've experienced so much of it that it takes a toll on you. You know, it's some things of you getting onto an LTC bus and everyone else passes in front of you and you're the only person of color, but you're the one that stopped and has your transfer ticket scrutinized intensely. You know, a small thing like that, going to get your passport photo taken and they're like, oh, here's some powder for your face. Oh, wait, we don't have a color to fit your skin tone. It's all of these little things when you're walking down the street and people are looking at you suspiciously in your own neighborhood. All of these things add up at the end of the day that basically tells you that you as a person of color, as a member of the BIPOC community, do not belong in their own community. And it is these things that are really harmful. And people who are hesitating to speak up when they see these things or to make these changes, it's also for them to know that when you don't do that, when you don't speak up, we see that. We see your silence, and that tells us that you are also taking part in ensuring that a space is not safe for us.
Silence is violence a lot of times. So, you know, we have a lot of people that are viewing this, and, you know, whenever we talk about race or anything, people are like, oh, I don't want to make any movement because, like, I'm going to screw up and then I'm going to be on Twitter and it's going to be all over Facebook, and, you know, so I just want to have some discussion about, let's talk about what anti-racist work does not look like misconceptions, where people are just trying to really like do their best, but it actually, thinking back to what Amanda was saying, where it actually can do some harm. So before we go into like direct actions of what people can do, what does anti-racism not look like? Like, what does that work not look like? I mean, one thing for me would be the sort of white savior idea. You know, it doesn't look like that, where you are a person not of a community and coming in and being like, this is what you need, blah, 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 blah. I'm helping you, look at, here's my money, blah, blah, blah. So just very briefly, if everyone can sort of give it an idea or a thought of what it doesn't look like, thinking about your own experience. So let's go to Awâsis.
So I think anti-racist work doesn't look like flooding to a cause around a flashpoint with no intention of sustaining ongoing relationship building. Like, it's great to post online, it's great to attend a rally, but if we're actually going to confront a structure of power, it's not a one-day event, and it's not going to happen on social media alone. It's going to come through strengthening our community ties and our relationships.
That is an amazing answer. And that's where, when we were opening up this panel talking about, like, is it a buzzword? You know, anti-racist work, like, yeah, I'm all about anti-racist work, but it's like, what does that look like? Like, beyond going to a rally or going to a protest. Anthea?
Yeah, I think I have difficulty going like what it doesn't look like. I'd rather like look at what it does look like. And I think on an individual level, I'm sorry, there's some kind of plane scenario happening right now. What it I analogize it to like a tree, and so some of the best like support and accomplished work that has happened for me has been people who look like roots to me for the tree. They're unseen. It's not about their leaves and them being seen that like they're doing this great work, that they're foundational, that they are instrumental, and it's not about their own self-congratulation. So I guess, yeah, anti-racism work doesn't look like self-gratification. You're not doing this thing to get brownie points to look good in society. What you're doing is you're investing in realizing that the empowerment of those with silenced voices are just as important, and if not more so important, to your survival and success in this world as well.
I think that's an excellent answer. Thanks. Amanda. Oh.
I see it as what it not as is white people teaching white people how not to be racist. So a lot of things that I see is like, again, these people that read these books and maybe knows an indigenous person, and now they're like, I'm holding workshops and I'm going to hold space because I have knowledge and I can educate you on how not to be racist because I've done a little bit of the racist work and feel like I'm not as racist anymore. And so that's what it's like, no, you can't, it can't be white people teaching white people how not to be racist. You need to hear from the BIPOC community. You need to hear their stories. You need to hear the history. You need to hear it from them. So I feel like when they do that, and then I see groups of white people that are joining these, and then they're coming out and saying, we're still saying racist stuff, and they don't understand why, but it's because they didn't get it from the right source. So it's great that these people are educating themselves, but again, just because you're educating yourself, that doesn't mean that you've become a teacher and that you can facilitate these workshops and do this work. If you are, if anyone that's an ally would know that they shouldn't be doing this work and that they need to step back and hold space and open up space for a BIPOC member to come in and do this work. So that's where you can see the difference of allyship. So if you see people coming forth and saying, I'm an ally, but I'm going to do this work, but you don't see any brown faces in that group, and no brown faces had anything to do with the structure of that workshop, it shouldn't be done. So that's what not should be happening right now. It shouldn't be the white people trying to educate the white people on how not to be racist.
And pay those brown faces.
Yes, exactly. Compensate them for their time and energy that they're
yes.
Hey, but anti-racism work does not look like it's tokenizing brown people to do that work for you and not paying them again.
Yeah, it doesn't look like free labor, trauma porn. It doesn't look like anything like that. So, Heenal, you were.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I mean, I'd also say that anti-racism work is not about not saying racist things. It's different. It's about it's not about just reading books. It's not about an annual cultural festival. It's not about I'm trying to get that word up. It's not about, thank you. It's not about fetishizing aspects of BIPOC cultures. It's not about land acknowledgements that are just templates or boilerplates. It's not about tokenism like representation or boards or committees. It's not about simply educating. It's really a work that has to be experienced and a journey to continue, to continue on.
Anti-racism work is not consumable.
Yeah, yeah. Alicia.
I think I second what everyone said, but also anti-racism work does not look like making yourself feel better and absolving yourself of your own white guilt. It doesn't look like going off and doing your own thing to make you feel better without consulting the communities that have been doing this work for years. And giving them more emotional labor in order to help you feel better, that too.
Yeah. Yeah, so I definitely like the tokenizing, the fetishizing, like it's not about that. Like you don't need to hear people's traumas in order to, be a human and and not be racist. So now direct actions, like we were saying, a lot of people often are sort of paralyzed. They don't want to do the wrong thing, anything. So just also concisely, what does it look like within the context of London? Like what can London do? Londoners who are watching this panel and step away, what is like tangible, direct things that Londoners could do to start their journey of anti-racist, or I'm saying start their journey. That should have been started a long time ago. But anyways, you know, so what can Londoners do, and what does that look like? Because we often get really lost in the rhetoric, in the debates, and I think people are like, ugh, you know, so tangible, solid steps. Anthea?
Yeah, I think that people in power, so even just a little example of empowering communities, I'm being offered training in like bike mechanics so that there is visibly somebody who is of the BIPOC and queer community that can also be teaching others, so that there's representation there, right? So that's using your power and feeding it back to the community, so that that is a tangible way in which you are counteracting the very racist world that is like the bike world, that is very much dominated by white dudes, and purposefully changing that and changing the narrative in there. So that's one way.
Awesome. Amanda?
I would say go find the BIPOC leaders that are doing the work. And that doesn't mean go running to the reserve or go running to the first or Native organization that you can think of and run there and be like, okay, you guys need to help us do this work. Do your research. There's a lot of leaders out there that are doing this amazing work in all the different communities. We're all on Twitter. We're all on social media. It's not hard to find us. You know, we've probably been in front of your face the whole time. You just never looked at us. You keep looking behind us and past us, but I think it is just finding those that are doing the work and then bring them in and ask them to help and pay them to come and help you. Bring these Indigenous BIPOC consultants, facilitators, educators in. But again, don't go running to the first Native organization. Don't go running to the communities. They're not ready, but there are many leaders that are out there that are using their voice, using their truth, and want to do this work and have been doing this work. So find them and connect with them and allow them to have space. And when you invite them in, don't come in and tell them how to think or feel. You need to listen. You need to stop talking, stop thinking, and listen to what these people are saying and what they feel like the best actions are, and then follow through with what they're saying. Don't come bring them to the table and say, that's great, now we're just going to go forward with our own plan. You didn't solve the problem by that. That's still not solving the problem. That's still leaving the BIPOC community's voice out of it. So when you do invite them into the space, listen, learn from them, and then follow through with what they're asking you to do for the community. Don't just go with your own agenda.
Exactly. I would say also on that note, people need to do some work on understanding what accountability is, and, you know, how, like, being accountable for those conversations and those discussions and things that, you know, are being promised or said we're going to work on. You know, that a lot of places are just like, oh yeah, we'll do this, blah 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 blah, and then they're gone. I find that also very much a London thing in some places, where, you know, oh, here you are, sort of the flashpoint that Awâsis was saying, like, this is popular, we're going to get you to do this, and we're going to do this, and then gone. Awâsis, do you have anything to, like, what is a direct action that is anti-racist work that folks can take away?
Yeah, so I'd say start getting better at identifying different forms of racism. So we talked about how, you know, there's structural and institutional racism. It's within our like cultural lives, right? Like how like a campus community has its own forms of racism, right? Versus like your neighborhood, interpersonal microaggressions between people, but also intrapersonal, like within ourselves. Like, start thinking critically about your own thought processes and how you relate to other people. Who are you more likely to listen to or hear? And who are you more likely to pass up? But in terms of direct actions, like challenge colonial place names, learn about the land you're on, learn about that changes your entire relationship to the river if you start understanding her as Deshkan-Zibing and not the Thames River. Challenge racist statues, colonial symbols, and really start building your system of support so that you can take more risks, so you can take direct actions based in ongoing relationships with the land, with Indigenous peoples, with people of color, so we can get better at disrupting white supremacy.
Amazing. Yeah, I often tell people, like, as step one is learn about the history of the land that you're building your life on. You know, that's a huge part. If you are choosing to build your life in London and have your family and stuff, you should know, anyone all over the world, like, what is the history of the land that you're walking upon. So thank you for touching on that. Alicia, do you have a tangible step?
Well, going back to a couple people mentioned already with place names, there is this young kid that has been trying to get the road changed to the name Plantation Road. It's been 2 years. She's only gotten like 4,080 signatures. How is it taking her this long, especially with all of the conversations that have been happening? Go sign the petition. If you're living on the road, put your name forward to have it changed. Challenge these place names. Look at where you're spending your money and who you're giving that to, supporting local organizations that are doing the work, that are predominantly BIPOC-led. Critically looking at the news that is being fed to you. And I think also really taking part in direct actions that are being led by BIPOC folks in the community. So showing up for the rallies, if you can, in a safe way, considering we're in time of pandemic, but showing up for these rallies, showing support in the ways you can, listening when BIPOC folks tell you what's okay and what isn't. I have seen that happen way too many times in this city. And I think another direct action would be to personally stop supporting people around you who are engaging in problematic behaviors. That needs to end, because this continuation of approval that's implicit in that needs to stop. And it's the only way we're going to keep making change in this city and making it more welcoming.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Alicia. Heenal.
Yeah, those are all great suggestions. I've three more things to add. So Alicia mentioned how funding can be an issue for groups to do work. And I just read that last month, the City of London they made a decision, the council, to allocate 25% of their community grants budget towards anti-racism groups in the city. So that's $500,000 for their 2021 grant program. So if you know of a group that's doing good work, or you have an idea for a project yourself, maybe that's something you can think about. There is the barrier of needing a charity or organization to work with. But if you have, if you have a cool project idea, maybe there's someone on one of us on this panel might be able to help you with that. So I'm just putting that out there. Spread the word about that, because I don't know if everyone knows about that funding that's available for anti-racism work in London. Secondly, I would say maybe a very simple thing to do, and a very enjoyable thing to do as well, is change the media you consume. Just think about, diversify where you get your news from, diversify what you watch. Even, Netflix has things on now that they even are trailing a thing, this bookmarks celebrating Black voices. And there's lots of things. Just Google, ask your friends, ask people, change the media you consume, and as part of your journey. And thirdly, there's this directory that a few of us are working on that's called BIPOClondon.com. And the idea is that it's a directory of BIPOC-owned businesses and BIPOC-led organizations, BIPOC artists in the City of London. It's very much in its infant stages, about 100 entries on there. But take a look at that maybe when you think about where to go out to eat or go out to enjoy something in London. And maybe if you have any ideas for any suggestions of things to add to that, people or places to add to that, please let us know, and we'll be happy to do that.
Oh, awesome. I'm pretty interested in that website. So we are coming near an end. I feel like the last question sort of summed up a bit about what we were asking. Every one of our panelists were asked to come up with a call to action, which we will have posted. We also have asked our panelists to comprise any sort of resources for self-learning or places to support. So we'll also have that posted. So we could also get the petition link for Plantation Road to change it to anything else. So, there is the idea that you need to do self-learning. I think that is a huge part. So thank you so much for coming up with the resources that you have for folks to, do their own self-learning. So our last question was a call to action. So I'll wrap that up in anything closing comments. So everyone will just have a moment to say what their call to action is and any final thoughts on this. So Anthea?
Yeah, so I think that I love dissecting these things, these issues, and talking about them, but I think it's also really important to invest in like BIPOC joy and BIPOC celebration of our stories and knowledge exchange and cultural exchange for that, because I think it's a very slippery slope when we become invested in the struggle of minorities or racialized individuals, and that becomes the story of peoples. And we're so vast and so layered of experience and have so much to give to this world that it's not just about our struggle. But it's in saying that as well that I'm so happy to have been a part of this panel, to be able to have these conversations. I think it's so important to be in that place of uncomfortability, because it does shift social change and social view. And so thank you.
Thank you. Amanda.
Well, I think it's amazing to be a part of this conversation, and even seeing the leaders that are here too. It's like you got some great information coming from some amazing people. So again, if you're looking for leaders, like where do I start looking? You're seeing us. We're right here. We're right in front of you. And again, I think it is one thing is like you're always going to, when you do something different or something new, you're going to step out of your comfort zone. It's not going to be comfortable. You're going to make some mistakes. But as long as you're learning from those mistakes and take accountability for your actions and in making those positive changes, you're going to keep growing, you're going to keep moving forward. A lot of times when people make mistakes, they get hard on themselves and, they try to hide them, or they use that shame or their criminal guilt. So it's like, you just get uncomfortable. That's where growth happens. So just keep moving forward. If you make a mistake, you know what, we all make mistakes. Even from the BIPOC community, we're still making, I'll speak for myself. I make mistakes. And I always take lessons from those mistakes and move forward. Use it as a healing opportunity and a learning opportunity. So this is what it is. It's a healing and learning opportunity. So still keep taking those steps forward. It's going to be uncomfortable. You're going to make some mistakes, but learn from them, and you're going to grow as a person, and we're going to grow together as communities and societies if we just keep staying out of our comfort zone.
Totally. Get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Awâsis.
I definitely echo all that. I think that, getting uncomfortable is important. I think that take the time to start to interrogate your own value system. Like if you do that enough, you'll start to realize that there is endless anti-racist work to do. You'll start to look at the world differently. These place names and racist statues will start to stand out to you. So really just like get to know the land you're on, but not in this like necessarily like super romantic spiritual sense, but just literally like what is surrounding us when we're walking down the street. Who is Dundas, right? That if you look into that, it's disturbing. So just really familiarizing yourself with your surroundings. And I wanted to echo what Amanda said too, that, if it like be open to changing and growing your opinions over time as you engage with new information and experiences. You're not expected to know it all, but you're not expected to hold on to racist ideas. That time has come. So be open to learning and growing, and building more meaningful relationships with where you live and the communities that surround us.
Yeah, totally. Like you're not expected to know the ways to navigate it, but you're also you're expected to be doing movement, to be moving forward, to be doing something, anything. Alicia.
I think I'm so grateful to be on this panel with everyone, such amazing folks speaking. So I would second that. I think a reminder to folks that being racist and anti-racist isn't about who you are, it's about what you do and the choices that you make every single day. And this isn't a conversation that is only for folks who are white. It is also for folks who are people of color as well. For white folks, it is acknowledging and understanding how racism interplays itself in your life. It's working to change your internalized racism. It's interrupting racism when you say it. And for folks who are people of color, it is also examining your own internalized racism and how it is applied to other people of color communities, and doing that work of keeping yourself whole in a world that tells you that you shouldn't exist and you don't belong. And I think it's a challenge to folks to not engage in apathetic racism, where you feel like this doesn't apply to you, so you don't need to do anything about it and you don't need to take action, because we've all grown up in a system that is inherently racist. So we re-socialize into it. So the question isn't whether or not we are racist, it is what we're going to do about it.
Yeah, totally agree. Thank you. Heenal?
Yeah, it's been great being a part of this panel. I wish we could do this more often. In fact, I don't have too much else to add in terms of calls to action. I would just say to people, keep asking questions, stay curious, don't think, if you think that you've got the answer at some point, you're probably, going down the wrong path. So keep asking questions, stay curious. And at the same time, have grace and patience for yourself, because this work is hard. It's really, really hard, and it takes time. So just have grace, laugh at yourself. If you catch yourself being racist, don't beat yourself up. Laugh at yourself, acknowledge it. It's not, it's not your fault as such. It's something that's embedded and into the fabric of our society. So yeah, having grace and patience for yourself and for people around you, and staying curious and reaching out. Use these resources that are there. Reach out to organizations in London. Speaking for myself, I don't know about others on the panel, but is there anything that I've said or anyone said that interests you, reach out to us and let's talk more about this, because it needs all of us who feel called to do so to be doing this work and doing so every day, if we're actually going to make any kind of shift that is needed.
Amazing, all amazing answers. I should stop saying amazing. Thank you, folks. As for viewers, reach out to these folks. In the resources list, we'll also have social media handles, Twitter handles, ways to get in contact with these folks and see the amazing work that they're doing. So thank you, panelists. You're all amazing and keeping amazing.
Amazing, 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 amazing. Thank you for moderating and creating the space.
And we're done.
Thanks, everyone.